All right, that was Black Eyed Peas. Thank you for the opening credits, Black Eyed Peas. Uh, can't believe we got them. But all right, so it's a time for another Google Hangout for field goals, talking about the Seahawks. And as per usual, this is Kenneth Arthur, your host. With me, as almost usual, is Jackson Bevins. How you doing, Jackson?
Good, man.
Good, good. You enjoying the World Cup?
Yeah, yeah. How can you not?
I didn't watch any of it, but it sounded pretty exciting on Twitter. I heard a lot of people say in the beginning, "Oh, I can't believe this is happening," and then a lot of distress about how their lives were such terribly shitty because the U.S. team wasn't doing so good in the second half, even though they hadn't given up a goal, and they gave up a goal, and everybody was burning their flags, and then all of a sudden another goal. So it sounds like it was pretty intense. Were you watching it?
I was catching glimpses in between consultations at work, but yeah, I caught what I could, and it was great.
Yep. And so now welcoming for the first time, and definitely not the last. He should be on a lot more regularly in the future. Danny Kelly, what's going on, Danny?
What's up, fellas? How you doing?
Doing pretty good. This is the first time I think for a lot of people to see your face, and I think a lot of people were wondering, "Wow, you look a lot like Bill Murray." And it might be shocking to them that you, in the past, have used a picture of Bill Murray, I believe.
I think a lot of people didn't realize that was actually Bill Murray. Like, I literally people thought I was that guy.
Right.
Probably
And
still do, actually.
some probably do still do. I
Might come as quite a shock.
it's coming. In the past, it's really only been your voice on certain KJR and then your writing, obviously, and Twitter AVIs of people that are not you. So it's good for people to get another look at or the first look at your face, but then at the same time, a lot of people might just be curious about where you came from because when John Morgan left the site in 2011. A lot of people didn't know what was going to happen next because Morgan is sort of a very unique writer. He had developed a certain style of field goals that developed quite the reputation among Seahawks fans in the blogosphere. And then you come along, and nobody knows exactly what to expect, but I think a lot of people think that, field goals has taken on a good life of its own since then. So how exactly did you come about taking over field goals in 2011?
I was originally just writing some random blog on whatever it's called, like what are those, like WordPress or whatever, something like that. And then one of the SB Nation guys just got a hold of me and asked me if I wanted to do it, and I was like, sure. I literally barely even had read field goals before that, and so I came in not knowing what to expect at all, and that probably made things easier. Just kind of going in really naive and have no idea what to expect. It was just kind of fun, and I brought Jackson along right off the bat. That helped, and then I'd seen you commenting a couple times. Actually, remember one time, one of the first articles that I had to write was this the top 10 Seahawk busts of all time, and I started writing about Taco Wallace or something like that, and I remember vividly people didn't get that I was joking, and you piped in, you were like, dude, he's being sarcastic, and I was like, okay, so this guy can detect sarcasm on the internet, so that's always a good sign. And so
Right.
I kind of went to your profile and I seen that you'd written a bunch of different fan posts and things, and I was like, gotta get this guy on board. So that was kind of history. I mean, obviously, then picked up a bunch of different people, learned more about football. Yeah, that's about it.
Right. What would you say? Yeah, and I really appreciate having been on and love if I could give any advice to anyone because in the past, oh, it creates a wind tunnel over here.
All right.
In in the past 3 years, I've seen a lot of people be brought on as given an opportunity to write on field goals, and I've seen a lot of people not write for field goals after a little while. And there's definitely opportunity for anyone that is interested that gets an opportunity. I would say, just write until you think Danny's going to tell you not to write anymore because you're writing too much. But what would you say is your sort of, when you come up with your articles, is there any sort of inspiration where it's going to be, is it sort of, where do you get your ideas from, do you think, or is it just a matter of you read a lot of, because I know you like to go through stuff like books and articles, things on philosophy and game scheme and that kind of stuff. So do you just sort of read something and then come across one tidbit and say, how does this apply to the Seahawks? Or exactly you get?
Usually it's just like random. I don't have any sort of plan going into it. Like typically I'll just like watch a game, and if something interesting, sticks out, then I'll write about that and try and find other plays that are related to it, kind of thing. And so like it's just random. I don't really have a plan ever. I just kind of just go about and look for interesting things that I find interesting, and take it from there. So I mean, every once in a while I have like things that I have to write about, like sponsored posts and things like that, or like subjects that you have to write about. But most of the time it's just kind of what I find interesting, and hopefully other people do too.
Right. Jackson, you've known Danny for quite a while, dating back to high school, I believe. Mm-hmm. How would you say that your experience has been with sort of field goals, and if you have any questions maybe for Danny, or what you'd be curious about with, I don't know where I'm going with this one, but you've known Danny for a long time.
I've been fortunate having known Danny that he and I have been able to dialogue ever since he took over. And I remember that I had checked out his blog. I think it was called Seahawks Win, Danny?
No, it was like the Seahawk or something like that. I don't even know what it was. I forget.
And I was coming away really surprised at how good it was, like the depth of understanding it, and not because I didn't think Danny was smart. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Danny, weren't you voted most likely to win Who Wants to Be a Millionaire our senior year in high school?
No.
Remember when that was a thing?
I got best laugh.
Oh, that's one that probably does better with the ladies.
That one's more beneficial.
But yeah, Danny's always been real smart, and I was just really impressed by how much he knew. And I had been writing similarly for a Blogspot blog that I started, and had no idea anybody read it because there's never any comments other than nice article, son, from my mom on about every third post. But it was, I think, a fantasy baseball draft that we went out to a bar afterwards, and Danny told me taking over field goals, and I couldn't believe it because that was a spot that I went to for information and held in pretty high regard. And he asked me if I'd be interested in contributing, which was a huge honor and very intimidating. And my whole goal ever since has been to write well enough that people don't think I'm doing this because I'm Danny's buddy.
Well, one day you'll get there, Jackson, I'm sure.
I know it, man. I just gotta stay with it.
Yeah, all right. So I think that we're here to talk about the Seahawks, and that's what we write about. So if we go on to our first topic of the day, it's sort of taken over the local headlines over the last week, is Marshawn Lynch. We don't really know exactly what's going on. Nobody is, as far as I know, since the last time I checked up on it, no side has said really much at all. It's just sort of other people saying stuff about what they've heard from either camp. But is it going to be a situation that Marshawn Lynch is? Well, I guess we'll find out when OTAs are happening, and as more stories might come out. It definitely does seem like there's a little bit more weight to it, that he's not 100% satisfied with his upcoming deal. Danny, do you think that is some truth to this? I know some commenters are already starting to get a little antsy that, you know, there's no news. Why are you guys talking about it? But yeah, there is no news. So what else are we supposed to talk about? What do you think? Is there real story here or not?
Yeah, I think there is. I mean, I don't think he's going to go, just based on what everybody said. But the most Marshawn Lynch thing ever would be if he just shows up and like pretends that he had like nothing had ever happened. But I think just based on kind of like what people have heard and what I've heard in the background, sounds like he legitimately does want more money, and the question is whether the Seahawks will budge on that. I mean, I can't really blame him at this point if he wants to try and get a little bit more money this year, just because he's never going to have more leverage than he does right now. And even if he has very little leverage right now, which I think is true, you know, that's kind of why he's using the whole retirement threat thing, because he doesn't really have any other, you know, leverage in terms of he just signed a deal 2 years ago. He's still a top, you know, 6 or 7 paid running back. I think top 5 maybe even. And so I think, you know, that's kind of his leverage point. I don't think he'll retire, and I don't think he'll get a raise. I think it'll just kind of blow over, and eventually he'll come back to camp, and you know, maybe they'll pitch him some like contract restructure where he gets, you know, they change his bonus structure, or give him more money for, you know, or you know, because right now his bonus hits at 1,500 yards, which is probably not going to happen, especially if they're having Christine Michael, you know, take part in the rotation. So I don't know. And if you think about it, just like his agent apparently just switched agencies, so maybe he's just trying to make a big splash in this new place and try and bring in some cash. You know, Lynch is a weird dude. I was actually just watching the interview with Deion Sanders from the media day just yesterday or the day before, and he's just talking about, like, apart from how hilarious it is, he's talking about how he really just he doesn't like doing the he just likes doing his own thing. He's talking about he's always like wanted to lay back and as Deion said, lay back in the cut and just watch things and like but then he's like, but I'll be there on game day kind of thing. And I think that ultimately Lynch will be there, but he's kind of just always been like doing his own thing, and I don't think he likes doing the off-season stuff too much, obviously. So maybe he just thinks $70,000 is worth the shot at trying to get a little bit more money before he, you know, really has zero leverage left with the team.
Right. Jackson, logistically speaking, it probably wouldn't be that much of a danger to the team if they gave $1.5 million raise for next year and, you know, guaranteed something for him. But at the same time, in principle, it could set a bad precedent. So if you knew that this whole thing would be over if you paid him an extra $1.5 million next year, would you do it, or are you standing firm on the fact that you just signed a deal 2 years ago and there's still 2 years left?
I lean more towards the latter in terms of the Seahawks holding firm on this. I think precedence is important, and I mean, I think that Carroll and Schneider have one of the coldest axes in the league. You know, the second that they don't think you're meeting what they're paying you, you know, they come with restructure, and if not, as many folks, namely Lofa Tatupu and a couple of others have found out, that just means you hit the road. And the way the NFL is set up, players don't have that same leverage. It's kind of a one-way street when it comes to that. If you overperform your contract, all you can do is hold out. If you underperform your contract, you can get cut. And it's just it's a tough spot to be in for a player, especially with the running back. I mean, I think guys are starting to look around and see what guys are getting in free agency. You know, Noshawn Moreno and Ben Tate and some of these other running backs that seemed primed to cash in. There's just not a lot of money out there for them. And so this might be Marshawn's last chance to make more than he's making now. Careers are short at that position. I think he knows it. There's a lot of miles on him already. And I think the Seahawks are planning on running him into the ground for as long as they're paying him. So if the Seahawks do give in, I doubt it'll be all the way, and I doubt it'll be right away. If nothing else, I think they'll show that you can't just come to them and say, give me more money, and they'll do it. But it wouldn't surprise me terribly if they meet Marshawn somewhere around halfway.
Right. Danny, just give me a few quick thoughts on Robert Turbin. Do you think that Robert Turbin is any sort of – what do you think Robert Turbin's role is going to be next year? Because it really seems like as far as having a guy to get 15 to 20 carries, it's Christine Michael or bust. Like, you got to go – if you're not going to have Marshawn Lynch, Michael seems like the only viable option behind him. But do you think Turbin has a future as a running back, or do you think it's time to give up that kind of hope and try to make him more of a fullback?
Well, I don't know why they haven't already made him a fullback, frankly, but I think he has value. He's not an electric runner. He's not very shifty. He's not going to break a lot of tackles, but he's kind of just like this battering ram that they can use to, like, throw at people after Lynch comes out, kind of just keep the pressure on, demoralize opponents. Like, Lynch comes out, then and then as a defense, you're like, great, we don't have to worry so much about this frickin' guy, running into us every play. And I think the idea behind Turbin is, they're not gonna relent in terms of their physicality when he comes back in. And I don't know that, he's the best option, but I think that's kind of the idea. And obviously he's, I think, pretty good at, like, pass protection and things like that. He's decent in the passing game, and he's not gonna screw up his assignments and things like that. I think that's why Christine Michael didn't see the field last year, really, is because they didn't really trust him. That's just my take. I don't really know exactly what happened, but just based on reading between the lines and all that. I think I'm actually still interested in seeing Spencer Ware. I liked him a lot last year coming out of LSU, and he didn't really get much action. Obviously, he went to the IR. So right now it's kind of, I think Christine Michael is the heir apparent to Lynch, and I think Turbin still has a role as a special teams guy and as like a battering ram on, to just kind of spell those other guys. But I think they have a deep running back group, and they're set up for any situation where Lynch isn't around. I think they'll be okay. I mean, obviously, I'd rather have Lynch by far, because I think Lynch is elite and one of the best backs in the NFL, and the little things that he does, really stand out. When you go back and watch games, I've gone back and started watching the games, and just the little things he does is amazing.
Right. I mean, everything. It's about being complete, to be able to put yourself out there in more down situations. So that could definitely be a reason why Michael wasn't out there as much as Turbin last year. In fact, not out there hardly at all. Jackson, I know that if I could find a person in Seattle or the Seattle area that liked Michael more than you did, probably have to be a clone of you. So do you think that if given a situation where you knew Lynch wasn't going to be here this upcoming season, like for whatever reason, we don't have to speculate about that, but if Michael had to go in next season and be the main back, is this a guy that you're drafting to be your number one running back in fantasy? Like, do you believe that he's ready to do that right now, or are you thinking maybe it's kind of a scary proposition to have, if he was playing so little last year, to have him going out there this upcoming season and getting 18 carries a game?
The 18 carries a game part, I'm not too worried about. I think right now, Christine Michael with the ball in his hands is not only acceptable, I think it's dangerous for the opponents. He is a home run hitter. I think he can score from any part of the field. And physically, even at one of the most athletic positions in sports, you're going to have a hard time finding someone that surpasses him in terms of what he can do with the size that he has. And so that part of it I'm not worried about. But the thing that makes Marshawn Lynch so special isn't that he can get 1,300 yards and score 10-plus touchdowns. I mean, that's the back of the football card stuff. But, I mean, he's so assignment correct all the time. And in today's NFL, there's so much blitzing and so much help blocking. And, you know, what I think happens a lot of times with college running backs is, you know, they're one of the best athletes on the field, certainly if they're NFL quality, and they're not going to be asked to stay in and pick up blitzers a whole lot or chip block or do a lot of the other things that's going to put wear on their bodies. And that's a steep learning curve if all of a sudden you come in to the league and you're asked to pick up Navarro Bowman, who's coming in 5 yards on an untouched sprint. Like that's the stuff that Marshawn can do, and run the right route and make the catch and block downfield on short passes and do all of these tiny little things that might not be intuitive for other folks. So it would be when Michael doesn't have the ball that I would be a little bit more afraid, I suppose, than I am when they're actually running plays for him.
Well, I'm sure that it'll be by the time preseason rolls around. I'm sure this really probably will turn out to be a lot of talk for nothing. It's never for nothing. We have a good time. We like to talk to each other and speculate about shit that's not going to really happen. And we appreciate Marshawn Lynch and the Seahawks coming up with fake ass stories for us to talk about. But hopefully he gets a little bit extra money. I don't think that he doesn't necessarily. I think he does probably deserve a little bit more money, but you sign a contract. That's the kind of you can't sign a contract, a 4-year deal. Just realize that it's front loaded, and then say, well, in the 3rd year, I guess I'll just ask for more money if I do good. So that's something that will probably end up not being a big deal.
Can I just bring up your Seahawk poncho back there?
Yeah, absolutely. The Seahawk poncho is back there, and
it's
it's a really good poncho. It's big. Big guy like me, you got to have a lot of extra room. It's about half the size of a blanket, so I'm really enjoying it. And it has a much better place back. I have this little cubby hole right here that I don't know what the hell to ever do with it. And I'm going to cover it up with a poncho, but I ain't got no tax. So
is that a cowboy hat in there? What is that thing?
It's like a sort of just like a fisherman's hat when we went camping one year, and I just hate to throw stuff away. I'm a little bit of a hoarder, so we'll see. Not like dead cats under newspaper. Right. Or by the dead cats in newspapers. The next thing, I was going to try and bring up a video of Kevin Williams, but I feel like as soon as I start to touch this Google Plus thing, it's all fucked up and gone to hell. So I'll have to prepare for that next week. And I feel like I'm going to start a series on this segment on this show about rants and ranting about something. And the first thing I'm going to rant about is how Google, the most powerful internet company in the world, designs this crappy ass Google Plus system for everybody. So I appreciate the Hangouts, but you didn't have to make it so fucking complicated. So we'll just talk about Kevin Williams. The Seahawks officially signed Williams today, and a running back, Demetrius Bronson. Am I right? That's his name?
Yeah, I think so.
And they released Kenny Boatwright and Keith Price. So we'll start with just talking about Williams. He's a big body. He played a lot last season, but just wasn't very effective. And now he's going to go into a system where he is going to play less and hopefully be more effective. And he spoke today about the fact that he had chosen Seattle over the Patriots. Unbelievably, in the last 2 years, the Seahawks have become a better destination for free agents than the Patriots. So go figure that out. Danny probably spent some time over the last week looking at Kevin Williams, watching game tape from last season. What are your thoughts on how he's going to fit? Is this just going to be he'll take Clinton McDonald's snaps and hopefully do a better job? Do you think he's better than McDonald? McDonald, what do you think about that?
Well, I haven't actually looked at him yet, and I actually don't really know the Vikings defensive line very well.
Moving on to Jackson.
But no, what I was going to say, I think he's a very interesting addition to the team, and I think his main role is going to be like the 3 technique, the under tackle, kind of what Tony McDaniel did last year. And I think now McDaniel and him will kind of rotate, and I think they'll play McDaniel at the 5 tech a little bit and kind of Red Bryant's spot, what he was doing last year on base downs. And what Williams brings is really good length. You know, he's a tall guy. He's a really long arm guy. He's 6'5", and just based on what I've read and what I've heard, you know, he's very good at like diagnosing runs. He's a really good run defender, and he doesn't miss tackles, and he doesn't get out of position, and he's kind of just, that's right up Pete Carroll's alley. You know, he just wants guys that he can trust that to do what he wants them to do. Is kind of what I'd heard about, you know, Jay Howard back in the day. Was, you know, he was a kind of a promising looking guy. He had a pretty good preseason, but I think what I'd heard is they just couldn't trust him to stay in his lane, you know, stay like where he was supposed to be. And so that was kind of part of the reason he got cut. And so I think what Williams brings is a real dependability, really, really strong run defender, and kind of one of those guys that may, you know, flash here and there as a pass rusher, but mostly he's just going to be like a run defender. He's going to be Red Bryant, essentially, but on the inside. And I think, you know, that's really valuable because the Seahawks really pride themselves on run defense. They, you know, that's like where it all starts for them. That it's kind of like the physical, kick your ass mentality, you know, essentially make you one-dimensional on offense. That's their goal, and you know, it obviously helps that they have a historically good pass defense because they're essentially forcing you to pass. So it all just kind of works, you know, together in that sense. And so, yeah, you know, since I haven't really watched him, so I can't really speak specifics, but just like the scheme and sort of his reputation, I think it's a really good fit, and it's kind of one of those underrated things. It's like when we signed McDaniel last year. You know, not many people knew about him, and no one really knew what he brought, but he ended up being a really good 3-tech and playing a lot of snaps. And so it's going to be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see if both he and McDaniel make the team. I mean, I'm assuming they will, but they kind of have similar skill sets, so it'll be interesting to see if they move McDaniel around and you know, play him at the 5-tech, like I was saying, like the Red Bryant role. And
right.
So,
seems like
it's good because I was a little bit worried about the defensive line. You know, just looking at it, you got a lot of guys who are like in the 280, 295 range, and they're really good. But then, like what Dan Quinn says, if they want to get heavy, I was a little bit worried. Like, you know, can you depend on Jesse Williams to be that guy? I don't know. And I don't think Jordan Hill is even over 300 pounds anymore. I think he looks like he's more like 290. He's slimmed down, kind of like Clinton McDonald. So I think it's gonna be really interesting, but overall I think it's a really good addition, and I think he'll make the team, obviously.
Right. There are a lot of I think when we've talked about already, it's the running back group, and we've talked about the defensive tackle group now, and there's a lot of guys in there that we've found to be very interesting, and you know, it seems like they could end up becoming very interesting players on the Jaguars, and not necessarily on our team. Jackson, what are your thoughts on Kevin Williams? This is a Hall of Fame player that has just joined the Seahawks. Obviously, he's not in his Hall of Fame shape anymore, but can definitely provide an opportunity or can provide an upgrade, perhaps, going into next season if he feels rejuvenated on a new team. Thoughts?
Yeah. I guess, first of all, if you told me 4 years ago that there's going to be an underground railroad from Minnesota to Seattle, I don't know how excited I would be about the new general manager, but they keep coming over, and Antoine Winfield aside, being valuable contributions. I actually like the Winfield signing too, but I think that with Kevin Williams, you know, you're probably not getting the all-pro defensive tackle. But like Danny said, you are getting dependability in a spot where it matters more than you might think. Also size, obviously. It is a athletic defensive line. It's not a big defensive line, and he helps there. The other thing is, you know, yeah, the numbers down last year, and maybe his play was too, but he still had a really, you know, positive grade from Pro Football Focus. And, you know, that's not something I take lightly. He also played, 200 more snaps last year than any player on the Seahawks defensive line. And yeah. I don't think he's gonna be asked to do that this year. You know, he may only play, 720 snaps last year? It might be half of that this year. But if you can get him close to full strength on 50% of those snaps, I mean, you've got a really good piece. So I like it. It's a low risk move, and it's the interior of that defensive line is young. There's a lot of guys that are still potential guys, and so someone that knows how to do it and can maybe help teach these guys what to expect, especially with being done. Yeah, I mean, no reason not to do it.
Right, and Danny, you brought up the fact that the Seahawks secondary is something that really provides a lot of support to the Seahawks defensive line, and the Vikings had one of the worst secondaries in the NFL last year, so it wouldn't be surprising to see him, if he's able to get more time to rush the passer, to provide something against the run without having to worry about what's behind him. It probably will provide. Do you think, Danny, that the defense, I mean, just give me a yes or no answer. You don't have to. I know that you're putting yourself out there. Is the Seahawks defense going to be better next season than it was last season?
Yes. I think there's a chance. Obviously, I think Earl Thomas is a year older, and theoretically he'll be better. And same goes for Sherman. Obviously, Maxwell is going to benefit from more experience. The only thing I'm really worried about, honestly, is the pass rush. And I think, the way that they rotate Bennett and Averill, as long as those guys can stay healthy, you can throw Bruce Irvin in there on third down. I think they'll be fine. It's an uncertain group because there's some new guys going to be playing, and they're going to be relying on some young guys. But this is a team that had probably, depending on how you look at it, the best pass rush in the NFL last year. And that was a huge part of their success. And so that's pretty much the one thing I'm worried about. Otherwise, I think the other groups are just going to improve from here. I think, they're a little bit deeper at certain spots. And I think while they did lose some of their secondary depth, I think that the guys coming up are going to be just fine. And I think that, Pete Carroll knows how to coach those guys up for his scheme. So.
Give me a breakout star on the defense, a guy that's going to, someone that we assume is going to get more playing time. Just give me one name that you think, like sort of how we've seen, maybe Malcolm Smith. I know that he could take. There's still a lot more room for Malcolm Smith to become a known name from around the NFL, but now he is known after winning the MVP, Super Bowl. So maybe it's Byron Maxwell. Give me another name. Maybe someone a little bit more sleepery than Byron Maxwell that you think will break.
Okay. Well, I was gonna say Bruce Irvin. I just think he's gonna surprise some people with how well he plays this year. But in terms of more sleeper than that, I think a guy like Jeremy Lane in the slot playing the nickel. He's going to have a big role. I think the Seahawks played almost 50% of their snaps last year in the nickel, or something like that. I'd have to check, but
I don't know if that's more. I don't know exactly what the average would be. What would be the average? 50% compared to? Is that a lot or little?
That's actually a little. I think most teams do more than half in the nickel nowadays. The Seahawks, they play the NFC West more than because they play in the NFC West, they're facing sort of the smash mouth teams more often, I think. But in general, nickel packages and sub packages just in general are like insanely popular, prevalent now. So you have nickel. There's no real starters on offense anymore for most teams. It's kind of just like, what down are you talking about? You have first and second down guys, you have third down guys. So I think Jeremy Lane will be a guy to watch. And I think, it'll be interesting to see if Deshaun Shedd gets some more playing time this year. And Jerron Johnson. I think, it's just the depth at safety is a little bit disconcerting. Or
it could also, it's a little disconcerting, but at the same time, I think there's definitely the possibility that safety could also still be a strength. If Johnson, these guys are guys who are still a little bit unknown, but that's how the whole thing is. We throw guys out there every year, and sometimes they become great players, and sometimes
that was like Maxwell last year. He was like, I think, third or fourth on the depth chart behind Thurman and Browner and those guys. So, and he looks like he's a pretty good player and could have a really good year this year. So, I just think Carroll really knows how to coach those guys up for a system and ask them to do exactly what they can do and nothing more. And, you know, they design their schemes around what guys can do. And so, sorry, can you hear that siren?
Hot take, Danny. They're coming for you.
No, we could not hear that really loud siren.
Sorry about that.
Jackson, is the Seahawks defense going to be better next year? And give me the name of a breakout player on defense.
Yeah, I think. I mean, marginally, it's, you know, I don't know how much better there is to be, but they had a tough stretch against the run there for a while. I think that's a point of improvement. I think, you know, I don't know if he's sleepery enough now, but I think Malcolm Smith is going to have a good year. I think that he showed to be really reliable, being asked to do a few different things last year, and I was really surprised. You know, I saw him as just sort of a project, and he turned into a guy who knows where to be a half step quicker than you'd expect, and there's a lot of value in that, especially in the system. So, yeah, I think we'll see more from Malcolm Smith this year, and you know, I don't know that Seattle lost a lot on defense in terms of production. You know, Red Bryant's going to hurt, but hopefully Kevin Williams helps fill that void. And, you know, linebackers are all going to be a year better, a year more experienced in the system. I don't know that there was any drop-off from Browner to Maxwell, maybe just a slightly different style of play. There's no reason to think that the secondary is going to be any worse with Brown or gone. I mean, Maxwell had a sub-50 passer efficiency against him. I mean, he was in Richard Sherman territory. So, yeah, and he'll be more experienced, and he'll be building off of success in this system. You know, Earl Thomas and Richard Sherman both use the phrase "get lost in the game" when they talk about Byron Maxwell. He's just so connected that nothing else exists, and that's a cool thing, you know. I think he can be almost as good as the other three guys in the Legion of Boom, and that says a lot. So I'm not sure where they get worse. Maybe some offensive coordinators will find some things with an off-season of game tape. I don't know where those cracks would be. They're all filled with speed. So yeah, I'm really excited.
Yep, and you know, it is interesting, you know, bringing up Malcolm Smith and talking about the Seahawks linebackers. A few weeks ago, I came across an article that I had written last year, and it's funny how you just forget the things that you say almost immediately. But I had said that the Seahawks and the 49ers going into last year I said they were even at linebacker, and I defended that, and I think that, you know, at the time, it was definitely sort of a kind of probably a stupid thing to say, you know, because Patrick Willis, Navarro Bowman, these are probably the two best linebackers in the NFL. And so to say that but it is interesting when you think about the fact that, you know, Bobby Wagner is a guy that doesn't get enough praise around the NFL, that KJ Wright is coming up, and that Malcolm Smith is coming up, and that Kevin Pierre-Louis will be added to that group, and I already like him. And there's other guys that are still unknown, maybe like Corey Toomer, Bruce Irvin, obviously, if you talk to him as a linebacker. So, Danny, you've recently been ranking all of the units around the NFL. Some people would criticize you for being a Seahawks homer, which I kind of...
They have a good team. What do you want me to say? Their roster is absurdly good.
I honestly had heard recently that they had won the Super Bowl, so, you know, you would think that they might be all right. But I'm surprised more along the lines of, I think you've taken some risks, like with some of your rankings of, you know, not being afraid. I think that maybe you're not swayed so much by the fantasy aspect, so much as you are depth. And, you know, your own opinion, you know, because some people, I think, I'm surprised that there just wouldn't be more talk just about, hey, what about my team? Most of the talk is centered around the Seahawks. And, you know, let's talk a little bit about some of these position groups, and Jackson, getting some of your opinion. Maybe you disagree with the running backs that were posted. You had the 49ers at the top. And tell me this, when you order them, the order within each level doesn't matter, right?
Right. Yeah, they're just, it's, to me,
So
it's like, I hate ranking things in general just because you can just analyze it to death till, like, you know, and it's all subjective, more or less. So to me, it made more sense to just, and I could wrap my brain around it more, is just to put them in like a somewhat hierarchical groupings, you know, like the best teams, which I would call the elites in this series, like the best teams at running back, and then the teams that, you know, maybe don't seem like, you know, and I said like damn good are the teams that are just below them, like, you know, and it wouldn't surprise me whatsoever if they ended up being like better this year. And then contenders are the same. You could have guys. I usually put teams that have guys that, you know, are unproven in there and, you know, could just blow up this year and sort of push them over the top. And so yeah, to me, it's not like really. The point wasn't so much to rank teams; it was just kind of talk about the depth on different teams and talk about players and you know, do that. But people always get really caught up in the rankings of where their team is and all that. But for me, it was more just interesting to look at like depth charts and see where teams are strongest and see how their rosters are constructed and that kind of stuff, and like where they put most focus, that kind of thing. It's like the Bills have actually a really good roster. There are a couple teams that I was just really surprised how good their roster looks on paper, if that makes sense, you know. And so that was just one example, but it was pretty interesting to go through and kind of try and, I guess, just think about the different players that are going to have a big impact this year. It was less about like actually ranking anything, you know. It was more just like talking about the players, and I find that more interesting anyway.
I mean, you know, I think a homer for the Seahawks, you know, as far as you had the running back unit only in the wild cards category. So I think a homer could have easily said we have Marshawn Lynch. 2 years ago, the Seahawks were the #1 rushing offense in the NFL. Last year, they were still top 8 in terms of DVOA. In terms of overall running the ball, they're running it a lot. They've invested in the running back position, but you have them, you know, as not in the top. So you have the 49ers, the Bills, the Bucks, and the Bengals in the elite category. Some people might be surprised about the Bucks and the Bengals especially. You know, you'd have to somewhat rely on Doug Martin coming back. And then in the next category, damn good, you had the Lions, the Packers, and the Saints. So as far as when you say wild card, you're saying, you know, these guys could be elite.
Wild card is like a group unto itself. It's not like, you know, at the bottom. Wild card is like, if this guy blows up, these guys are going to be elite. Like, to me, the wild card, like I did the tight ends today, and the wild card for me was the Patriots, because if Gronk comes back, they're immediately, you know, top 3, if not the best, you know, tight end group in the NFL, just because of Gronk, because he's so absurdly good. And to me, it was like I put the Seahawks in the wild card because if Christine Michael is who we think he is, then the Seahawks are going to have Marshawn Lynch, Christine Michael, and then 2 really solid potential backups in Robert Turbin or Spencer Ware or Derek Coleman. You know, so to me, it's like wild card wasn't like ranked last, and I think people just kind of got lost on like where they came on the page. But I think, you know, for me, the wild card was like this team. If this guy pops, then they're going to be crazy. And in terms of the 49ers, I just put them up there because they have guys that have a lot of experience already. You know, they have LaMichael James. He doesn't get a lot of experience rushing the football, but he has experience in games and obviously experience in the playoffs. And then what's the other backup's name? I can't even remember his name right now, but I want to say it's Hunter or something like that.
Kendall Hunter?
But, yeah, Kendall Hunter. So he's not anything necessarily special or he's not a lead or anything like that, but these are 2 guys that back up Frank Gore that have a lot of experience, and, you know, they've got carries and they're proven entities, and I think that kind of was the difference between where I ranked them with the Seahawks in terms of Turbin's the only guy that really has any experience in the regular season.
Jackson, you had also looked over the positional rankings. You've been checking those out. What would you say is the Seahawks' second best unit after the secondary, assuming that you would say the secondary is their best unit?
Offensive line.
I'm pretty sure that offensive line will be the only. From what I can tell, I think offensive line will be the only time the Seahawks will not get mentioned in these upcoming in the last few articles coming up.
Yep.
But so we've got tight end, defensive line, linebackers.
I'd go. It's toss up to me between linebackers and running backs. Assuming Marshawn Lynch is healthy and motivated and on board and all that, probably running back. I think, like Danny said, they're immediately elite again. I think they were elite last year as a positional group. The running numbers were down, but the blocking was bad. I mean, and that's they're playing with backup linemen all season. So he lapped the league in broken tackles, and that's all a running back can do when confronted with a tackler. He can't block the guy better. So Marshawn he was fantastic last year. I think and it's tough to say this because you can never make an exact parallel judgment, but it's tough to imagine another running back doing more with Marshawn Lynch's touches than what Marshawn Lynch did. And so if he's healthy, I'd say probably running back. But other than that, I'm really impressed with the linebacking core. I think Bobby Wagner is excellent. And he may never have the cachet of Urlacher or Lewis or Willis or even Kuechly now, because I don't think the system will ever call on him to be that big of a role. But I think he's the perfect guy for that situation, and he's definitely still on the upswing of his career. He's extraordinarily intuitive, and to trust him with making calls. I think they're great. KJ Wright is a rock. I think he's great. And like I said, I already have big expectations for Malcolm Smith and Bruce Irvin, even though he's apparently going to be a little bit less of a linebacker than the less of a linebacker he was last season. But, linebacker, running back would be the next two.
Yeah, the more we talk about it, it just seems, the Seahawks, they got a really tough schedule coming up. I think they play like 10 of their games against teams that were like top 12 in DVOA last year. It's going to be a tough schedule, but they could also, I feel like on defense, break some records when you consider they've got the best secondary, they've got a really good linebacking crew, if not, great. And we don't even hardly talk about Cliff Averill. It's like we've got these guys that we barely ever talk about, and they're like great players. Cliff Averill, Michael Bennett, and if those guys are supporting the outside, and you got Tony McDaniel, and there's guys coming up. Rob Stanton really likes Cassius Marsh. We don't know exactly some of these wild cards and how good they could be because Cam Chancellor. We're used to seeing. By now, we should be used to seeing fifth-round picks like Cam Chancellor having an impact as a rookie, Richard Sherman having an impact as a rookie. They had more of an opportunity to get out on the field, but we don't know yet exactly how strong some of these players are going to be. With our last few moments here tonight, Danny, you were talking about how the Bills were a team that you were surprised how strong their roster is. You can even mention that they've got a really good secondary even after the loss of Bird.
Yeah.
Is there a team in the NFC West that you're surprised? Because I'm trying to, as I go over the position rankings, I'm trying to recall if I've seen the Cardinals. But is there a team between the Cardinals or the Rams you're surprised, like as you go over the roster, you're like, they might not be as good as I thought?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. You hesitate to say anything like that because then I feel like immediately it's going to be the opposite that happens. But I saw, any of the other teams in the NFC I could see, or NFC West, I could see regressing. Even the Seahawks, because they have such a freaking hard schedule, could really if they get an injury or two to some major guys, there could, you could see them drop down to like 10 wins or even less if things start to spiral. But I just think it's such a hard division, and their schedule's so hard that it's. I think the 49ers or one of the other teams in this. I think the Rams maybe even have a tougher schedule than the Seahawks in terms of on paper right now, and so I think the West is going to be really interesting this year, and both the Cardinals and the Rams. I think there were some surprising, like they were not on some of my lists. And I think the Cardinals lost some key guys at linebacker, and I think that could be a major thing for them. And obviously they're not going to have Tyrann Mathieu or however you say his name back immediately. I think they're looking for like an October return date for him. So they're definitely going to have some stuff to overcome early on. But at the same time, their offensive line is getting a lot better this year. And if you give Carson Palmer, that crazy bastard, a little bit more time, it could be interesting. Because he's just one of those guys that has no like memory. That he has no short-term memory. He'll like throw 5 picks and he'll just keep chucking it. He's like Eli Manning in that manner. So he's kind of a gunslinger. So maybe that's the first time he's ever been called that. But I kind of just see them as a team that could either really threaten for the division. Obviously, last year they had a defense that could have carried them, but this year it'll be interesting to see how they do. And then at the same time, I think the Rams, they definitely have some crazy good talent on their defense, but I think their offense is still kind of a big question mark. And obviously Sam Bradford, it's kind of like a make or break year for him too. So again, for like the 3rd straight year, but yeah, I mean, I think the West is going to be crazy this year, and it's just impossible to really predict, obviously.
Yep, and it's been really, it's amazing how long the off season feels now. Like it always feels a little bit long, but I guess you win the Super Bowl and you want to know what's next, and so the season just seems really far away. I think that's about all that we have for tonight. Jackson, any final thoughts?
No, man, just really good to spend the time with you guys. Appreciate you having me.
Of course. And Danny, any final thoughts from you?
Someone just posted a photo of, I can't remember the comedian's name, but in the comments, so my more successful older brother, I remember seeing this guy do like his comedy bit, and he was talking about
Brian Posehn.
Yeah, he was talking about like talking to girls on the internet. I just remember a bit he did where he was like, "Hey, lady," and he's like pretending to type. Sorry, that was just really random, but I'm slightly offended, but also not because he's hilarious.
That's true. That is.
So no, I don't have any closing thoughts. Other than that was really distracting. Thanks, Granny Panties.
I think that's an appropriate closing thought for your first appearance on the Hangout.
Yeah.
Thanks again, you guys, for joining, and for everyone out there watching and listening. Hope to have this posted as a podcast, but then moving forward, hopefully I think we'll be back shooting for early next week, and we'll get that information out. Follow Field Goals on Twitter at Field Goals. Jackson Bevens at Jackson Bevens, JacksonBevens. Jackson, what kind of name is that?
Weird one, man. Messed up.
I think you should take Paulina's last name if you guys ever get hitched.
Yeah.
And then I'll take Jackson's last name if we ever get hitched. I think that's how it works. And I'm Kenneth Arthur at Kenneth Arthur S. So thanks for joining, and we'll see you next week.
Later, guys.
All right, see ya.